Macho is directed by Clint Eastwood and stars Clint Eastwood, Eduardo Minute, and Dwight Yoakam, and among others. And in this story, it deals with a former rodeo star, played by Eastwood, who gets recruited by his boss, played by Dwight Yoakam, to go to Mexico to pick up his son, who has been abused by who's been abused by people and things like that. And he has to basically go on a road trip in order to get him out of trouble and then bring him back to the States to be reunited with his father. And along the way, he gets into some mishaps with some other people, and it becomes pretty much a road movie. Now, here's some backstory. Now, this is actually one of the movies that I was actually hearing a little bit about, but didn't really hear much going on with it until probably like several months ago when I heard the news that Clint Eastwood was doing pretty much another Western type of film. A different, well, more of a modern, like neo-Western than what he used to do with his old days. Now, I'm a big Clint Eastwood fan, and there's been a lot of movies growing up of his that I've always enjoyed. I'll be one of the first to admit that I've never really watched much of his old Western films, like the Dollars trilogy and some of his other ones. I do plan on eventually trying to get to those someday, but I've always more fondly run to like some of his more like cop crime thriller movies, like the Dirty Harry movies and like Blood Work, and some of his other more later movies in like the 80s and 90s, and then the mostly in the 2000s too. And so I've always just had a lot of great admiration for Clint Eastwood, not only as an actor but also as a director. And he's made some like really great movies that that have been for decades. And I want to eventually go back to watching some of his old Western films to kind of always sort of get the feel out of what this movie was going for, because this one takes it to where it's doing more of a neo-noir type Western film, kind of like what we got with what we had a few years ago of Hell or High Water, or like No Country for Old Men, on that kind of level. And when I was seeing the previews for this, it kind of got me interested because it seemed like he was going for more of that kind of feel. And after upon seeing the film, I can say that, well, it's not one of Clint's best. I will admit it's a sweet, harmless movie that it does its duty for what it is. It's decent, but could have been a whole lot better. Now, to get my pros out of the way, once again, of course, Clint Eastwood is fantastic in this film. I loved his character. I loved his performance in this. He really, for 91 years old, the guy really still likes to still be doing these movies where it seems like he's about to retire, but then he just keeps on going. The way he keeps turn out movies left and right. He like movies like he did with Gran Torino, The Mule. It's kind of signs we're here where it seems like his retirement type of movie. That if it was his last one, he would go out. This would be like his last as far as starring in films. But that's not to say that he wouldn't be still as a director, because I still enjoyed the way that the movie played out with him, his character being a former rodeo star, and his admiration for animals in this, especially when he's around horses and everything. It really shows a lot of like great scenes where it's very heartwarming, and I especially got to really appreciate the chemistry with him and the boy, played by Eduardo Minute, I believe that's how you pronounce it. I thought they had great chemistry together, and they do have some great heartwarming moments that really got to me. And I got to really appreciate the rooster that's in the movie too, called Macho. And I thought it was funny the rooster was funny. It had some really funny moments with the way Clint Eastwood's character is talking to him in certain scenes, and has actually a scene in the end that kind of won me over with the way it played out. That was pretty cool. And one of the other biggest praise I have to the most is I love the way that the movie feels like going like those old school road type movies where you're going on a journey, and it's basically like a more kind of like, well, I'm not gonna go into detail, but let's just say it's like a more toned down version of Sicario 2 Day of the Soldado, because in both movies you have it to where a character is basically trying to get a younger person out of Mexico and over to the United States and traveling. and stuff on that kind of level, and they're getting into some bad things along the way. It was similar on that one, but it's a lot more toned down and more, more lighthearted, so to speak. Well, I mean, it still gets in some serious territory, but it's not quite as, like, very dark and gritty like Sicario was. But I mean that as a compliment. Because I really liked the way that we get to explore a lot of the scenery and everything. And the music, too, I thought was very nice, and it had a great, score to it. And, it's just really more of a straightforward type of movie that it kind of goes and goes, and it seems like that's where I kind of lean into my cons, is that it really could have had a more tighter script to it than where the movie was going, because it feels like it was leading to somewhere, something really big of where it was going, but the way it ends, it just kind of, it still pays off, but it feels very thin, because along the way, Clint and the boy are getting into some trouble with the people that are after him and things, but it really felt like they probably could have, elaborated more on what was going on, and maybe high up the stakes a little more to build more of the tension that I felt was lacking. Because a lot of it really falls into a lot of the pacing that plays into it, where scenes do often kind of do rinse and repeat, where they'll be going to the restaurant and Clint ends up meeting this waitress that's there, or this woman that runs this restaurant, and there's also a lot of scenes where it's just them, doing a lot of like horse riding and things like that when they go to this ranch, which is a nice heartwarming moment. It's just that you can see where the movie's kind of going, where it's just very like kind of, I don't want to say padded out, but it feels like it's just kind of just going and going with the vibe. They could have explored a whole lot more with some of the supporting characters that we really barely even got to see much out of. So that was one of my other issues I had, and maybe it's probably explored a lot more in the novel. But other than those things, I felt like the movie was still decent overall, but it's definitely not one of Clint's best. But it is still a very heartwarming and sweet type of movie that I can still recommend to at least my grandpa and to my parents. If you're into Clint Eastwood's, like, a lot of his, like if you're a hardcore Clint Eastwood fan, I do highly recommend it. And so with that being said, I'm going to give the movie a average Joe on the Film Phreeks meter. So for those of you who have also seen Macho and also read the book that it's based off of, let me know in the comments below what you thought about it. And thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next review. I'll see you later.